But let's move to the other biggest news of the week so far in the baseball season, certainly on the field, and that was the no-hitter thrown by Ronel Blanco, right-handed pitcher of the Houston Astros. I'm going to start with something very simple, Russ. What did you know about Ronel Blanco before Monday? This is a safe space. We can be honest. If you didn't know anything, that's totally okay. I'll explain what dorky roads led me to knowing a lot about Ronel Blanco before Monday, but I'm excited to hear, what was your reaction? I don't know where you, if you were traveling on Monday or whatever, how you watched this or whatever, but as you heard, sixth inning, sorry, who has a no-hitter in the sixth inning?
I was
your
on a
experience
flight.
following this?
I was on a flight back from Los Angeles, and I'm not going to lie to you, Jordan. I know everybody is listening to this and saying, oh, National MLB Insider Russ Dorsey knows everything about baseball. He doesn't. And he didn't know who Ronel Blanco was. And you know what, Jordan? That is okay. It's one of the best parts about baseball because on a specific day, this guy can be the best in the game.
Yeah. He can have all the headlines. He can have the MLB.com story that's here are 10 things you need to know about Ronel Blanco, right?
Yes, because they already know. You don't know right. You don't know one thing, so here's 10.
Right. But that's the beauty of it. It really is. When he woke up that day, did he know he was going to be in his 8th major league start, going to be making history? No, of course not. But because the Astros have had their fair share of pitching injuries to the rotation, in particular, of course, Verlander and Urquidy already, lost Garcia and McCullers, who are still kind of coming back from injury. There were innings available in this Astros rotation. And though Ronel Blanco, for the bulk of his professional career, had been being developed as a reliever, and the reason I was familiar with him is because he has basically been untouchable in the Dominican Winter League over the last 3 years, pitching for Estrellas out of relief, as the closer, pretty much. But a couple of years ago, the Astros were no, we still think this guy has the arsenal to pitch as a starter. And whether it was because it's not like they knew they were going to have this ridiculous barrage of injuries to their rotation, but it proved to be good to keep him stretched out and keep him developing as a starter, because now you go into the season with behind Valdez, Javier and Hunter Brown. They were damn, we need someone to be a starter. And here comes Ronel Blanco delivering a no-hitter against the Blue Jays to give the Astros their first win of the season, to give Joe Espada the first win of his managerial career, to give, Yainer Diaz. I think one of the big stories of course, this season for the Astros is what is this pitching staff without Martin Maldonado? We'll get to the bullpen in a little bit. But as far as the starting rotation, Framber looks fantastic. Right, Javier, I would say, looks pretty freaking awesome.
Yeah.
And then now you have this moment for Blanco. But just a really cool story. I mean, he's one of the many guys that they've signed out of the Dominican Republic or Venezuela for a little bit later. I think a big trend in baseball that is something that I think I would love to dig into more is teams are not investing internationally in pitchers at the normal age that they normal are, right? So we have, when players sign as amateurs out of the Dominican or Venezuela or other parts of Latin America at age 16, that is not a time you necessarily want to go all in on a pitcher and what they look like at 16, let alone 15 or whenever some of these deals are coming together, right? That's just a risky age. And so instead you see teams kind of take advantage and say, hey, let's wait to see what they look like when they're 18, 19. They're not going to command as much of a signing bonus. And then if we have good player development and we kind of trust in our ability, our organization to kind of bring these pitchers along, there's incredible talent that is still able to be kind of uncovered. And the Astros have done that over and over and over. Now 3 of them have thrown or been a huge parts of no-hitters in Framber, in Javier, and now Ronel Blanco. So it was really impressive. He was throwing 40% changeups, which is always fun when you see that from a starting pitcher over the course of a game. But yeah, watching some of the highlights, were there any other takeaways from this game for you?
I think for me, there's a lot of bad around baseball, and I know we're going to talk about that also in the pod. This wasn't a really bad lineup. You're talking about the Toronto Blue Jays that have Vlad Jr., that have George Springer, that has Bo Bichette, and he was able to carve them up. Right? It's not a perfecto, right? Which is the top tier performance you can have, unless it's a 20 strikeout game where you give up 1 hit, whatever. But this was a really solid performance against a really good team for a guy that does not have a lot of experience starting in the big leagues. And I think that was impressive in and of itself, where 8 major league starts, I'm not letting that guy go to 105 pitches. He's lucky to get 85 pitches.
Right.
And they said, Joe Espada said, he was probably going to be done after Vlad Jr., regardless of what happened. So I thought that was really cool.
Oh yeah, and now you mentioned that. Now I agree. You know, it wasn't a perfect game, and because we've had so many no hitters in recent years, like Jake and I have been pretty consistent. Like, perfect game is still such a different level, and
yeah.
But again, because of how rare complete games are for starting pitchers now, I can still appreciate any pitcher going 9, let alone if it's no hits or not. And you mentioned, right? Okay, it's not necessarily only 7 strikeouts. I mean, the only base runners were George Springer to like lead off the game, and then George Springer in the 9th. So I mean, it was roughly perfect for most of this game. And yeah, it was just, of course, an incredible achievement and something that, of course, was quickly undone from a Astros vibes perspective because of what happened on Tuesday with the Josh Hader implosion. And we can, I guess, get to that in a second. But it is a reminder, though, just the last thing on Blanco, like, that is why the Astros are going to stay relevant because while their farm system, and we've seen this with teams like the Braves too, their farm system is not going to rank. It's bad. I mean, it's bad, right? It's not a good situation. That doesn't always matter because they still have guys, and there's more coming. By the way, if you look at their system, you look at some of the pitchers they have at the upper levels, there are more guys coming that you don't necessarily know about yet that you aren't going to see on top prospect lists because they didn't sign for a lot of money or they were drafted in a later round. They are going to pitch quality major league innings. And it is a reminder that once they Astros are clearly not a perfect team anymore. But once they get, let alone once they get healthy and, get some of these guys back like McCullers and Garcia and everything, that is why they are still a team and an organization to kind of be feared, I would say, in the American League because they've kind of earned that benefit of the doubt, and I think Blanco's showing was really proof of that. But let's stick in Houston here for a second because not only does, of course, what happens over the weekend where they get mopped by the Yankees at home, this bullpen that we were all hyping up because. What else can we do on paper? You look at Ryan Presley, Brian Abreu, and Josh Hader, you say, how could it? It can't get better than this. I mean, even if they hadn't signed Josh Hader, we would say it can't get better than this, right? Well, so far, I believe they have the 28th ranked bullpen ERA in baseball. And Josh Hader going for his first save on Tuesday night, giving up a rocket to Davis Schneider. Listen, does that mean Josh Hader's never going to save a game for the Houston Astros? Of course not. But it is a reminder of how fickle bullpens can be in all small samples and the risks of expecting anything from any bullpen at any time.
Absolutely. And I think the change, like I think guys always say, hey, whatever helps the team win. So Ryan Presley saying that, I think one is important because it's a guy that's committed to winning. Hey, if this dude's one of the best closers in the game and I am also one of the best closers in the game, I can still affect this game in a big way in the 8th inning, and it makes us that much better. So salute to him for that. But it is an adjustment for him, for Abreu to be like, all right, our roles are going to have to change. Like coming in the 7th is different than coming in the 8th. And I think the idea of high leverage is kind of like jumbled together where it's like, the save could come in the 7th inning, right? Like we love doing that. But I still think baseball players are creatures of habit. So when you change those habits, whether it's coming in 1 inning earlier, 2 innings earlier for Abreu, it's like, all right, I need to settle into this role. Josh Hader, you talk about a guy who's a creature of habit. He's not a guy that's going to go out there, I'll get us a 4 or 5 out save. No, give me my 3 outs and let's go home. And so being in a new location again, after, being in Milwaukee and being in San Diego, now coming to Houston where these expectations of, hey, you got to be the guy now and you want to get paid, you get paid, and then it doesn't go well. Do I think Josh Hader is still a top 3 closer in Major League Baseball? I absolutely do. But to your point, bullpens are fickle. And sometimes they don't do what you expect them to do because it's not a exact science. And so I think the Astros are learning that. Also, Astros haven't been playing good baseball. So this just goes into that. But do I think there's a time where the 3 of those guys are electric and lights out at this point this season? Absolutely.
Yeah. But right. I mean, again, it's like Josh Hader. Oh, well, he was so untouchable last year. He leveled up. It's like, He had a 5.22 the year before that. I know
Right.
he was still an all-star,
Right.
but it's like, this is just kind of what you're going to have to deal with, not only with HITTER, because occasionally he likes to give up home runs, but also just when you have the control of that. But it's also, whatever, the small samples we're talking about in the first week of the season, that's just the nature of talking about relievers, is these tiny samples. And it's not just the tiny samples, it's the tiny samples that are the biggest moments of the game. So we are going to notice them. Of course, everyone is going to prey on any version of the Astros downfall. No surprise about that. To your point, I'm sure they will have an incredible run where they like all have a scoreless month, and it's like, how does anybody beat them? But for now, it's you got to get them when you could get them.
And I think to your point about HITTER and the homers, I think that's something that Astros fans are going to have to get used to, especially in that ballpark now, because Josh HITTER, even when electric, he does give up some homers, right? That fastball, it doesn't have as much movement as like a Blake Trinan in his prime, where it's like, I don't know how guys get hits off of him.
How do you elevate it?
Exactly.
Right? That's the thing. It's like either, and there's actually a good number of pitchers like this now, where it's like either, I mean, Garrett Cole, hello, right? Now, he obviously fixed that a little bit last year, but it's like either you can't touch it or you hit it over the fence, which is weird. It's like, it's kind of, counterintuitive that it would be that kind of binary, but like, that's kind of modern baseball because of the swings and because of how hard guys are throwing and because of throwing at the top of the zone, where if you're missing, and I think the pitch last night was a hanging slider, but still, like, it is interesting how sometimes pitchers are homer prone but also strikeout heavy. It is a very interesting mix, but HITTER definitely exemplifies that sometimes,
especially when it's like, all right, how do I get you to 2 strikes? And I think a lot of relievers think this way. It's like, oh, if I get you to 2 strikes, it's over, buddy.
It's over.
But before that, that's where you better get me before you get to 2 strikes. And so
that's true.
Yeah, I think to our point, like, I think Josh HITTER's gonna be fine. I think he's gonna be really good. But hey, get him early in the count.